welcome to the Big Kickoff Football Show with myself, Roy Shanahan, David Buggle and Neal Dobbs, all the way over in the States. So we may have a little bit of a lapse in time, but Neal will still be able to hear you no matter what. Now, we're going to go straight into transfer news because there's an interesting one today, and that's Christian Eriksen, who looks like he has agreed to sign for Brentford on a 6-month loan. Neal, I'm going to go with you starting off. Is this a good one? I mean, 6 months, it's not a risk for Brentford, and it's a good chance for Christian Eriksen, I suppose, to show what he can do.
Yeah, maybe look, this is the only avenue back that he can go to get back into football. He clearly wants to do it. There's obviously medical issues that are cleared in the Premier League as opposed to abroad. I think for Brentford, it's a no-brainer. They get a guy that's vastly experienced, good player, obviously hungry to get back into the game. So, yeah, for them, it could be a good piece of business. Maybe 6 months is the deal to get him going and kind of get him out there and see what it leads to. But it's great just, if anyone that tuned in last summer and seeing, the issue with Eriksen, and it grabbed everybody in that tournament. So it's a kind of a feel-good factor, good story to see him back in the game. And, I guess we wish him all the best and we hope that it works out. And we hope then, obviously, for Brentford that he settles in and he gets him some goals and, can kick on a season for them.
Yeah. Dave, this is not a bad one for Brentford, though, is it? I mean, they can use the goals, they can use a bit of guile. They've got a good striker up front who could benefit.
Yeah, like it's a very much a win-win for Brentford, really, because even just to have him around would be a great boost to have somebody that caliber around the training ground. And please God, obviously everything works out well for him and that he can come out and show his stuff again. And it could be that great old head, even though he's not that old, that can kind of really show a bit of experience and guile, because he's been there and done that. So, and then you have the likes of Tony and Mbeumo, who obviously Tony got a cracking goal yesterday. I'd watched that all day long, the way he just stayed on the ground. But it could be just that little bit of a boost that they need at the moment, considering one or two results haven't been going their way. So just to have him in the camp, I'd like to think it'll give them a lift. And then if he's to get out onto the pitch and show some of what he's done previously, will be just a great good news story. But God willing, like, God's good, and he's not putting himself under too much risk, which I'd like to think it's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're all looking forward to seeing what he can do, and we know he has that skill set, so it'll be interesting to see. Now, one that I was looking at, and this, I'm going to stay actually with Dave on this one.
Oh.
I found this one really interesting. Raheem Sterling was open to the idea to join FC Barcelona on loan from Manchester City before the La Liga side decided to purchase Ferran Torres. Now, this is coming from The Athletic. So you're guessing that there's something in this somewhere. What do you make of that? And does this mean, Dave, do you think that there's actually a thought in his head, if not now, very soon, that I might just venture elsewhere?
Yeah, because I don't think it's rocket science. Like, he's not quite the go-to guy at the moment. Like, he's in and out of the side. Obviously he missed another sitter the other day, which he does from time to time. It was easier to actually score than it was to do what he did. But there's no denying the jump in class when he under Guardiola, of which there's no denying that. And obviously he showed some of it with England last summer. But, maybe he's very aware of the way things are now at the moment, and he's kind of playing second fiddle to a few of the others, obviously with Jack Grealish being there, kind of competing with that left wing slot. So, maybe he's just open to options and maybe a venture abroad. And now is a chance for certain players. Now, don't get me wrong, Sterling's good enough, but now is a chance for certain players to maybe get a move to some of these dream clubs and sample what it's like to play with some of them. But because there's another one, I'll just briefly, Tagliafico off Ajax is trying to force a move to Barcelona as well. So there's sharks out there trying to get their chance. But with Sterling, I'd say he's a separate situation altogether, where I would imagine he's very aware of his situation there, and he might start to realise that his star is fading with City and it's time to go elsewhere.
Yeah, Neal, your thoughts on that? I mean, if Barcelona don't get him, could you see the likes of PSG, the likes of Real Madrid coming in for him?
I think he'd be sought after because I think, as Dave is saying there, he's definitely a player that has risen in stock since he's joined Guardiola. Like, he's gone up in international stakes for England. He's a dead cert starter. For Guardiola, I think this year it's always interesting at City when they have so much talent. I think Phil Foden went looking for Sterling's place, and Sterling broke back into the team last year. They signed Jack Grealish. And he was played wide left, and Sterling was left out initially, and now again he seems to have broken his way back into the team. So he seems to be the type of player that shows a good attitude and aptitude when he's left out or when he isn't getting in, that he can rise above the occasion and kind of prove a manager wrong. And that's a good quality in today's standards, whereas a lot of them just throw a strop, and that seems to be the end of that. So I think he'd have a lot of suitors. He's that type of player. He's high impact. He's very, very quick. He can play across the front three, which I would say wide left is probably his best position, but he could play in wide right in an attacking three. And in the likes of a Barcelona, PSG, that would be an Mbappe role, a Neymar role, and Sterling is able to fill boots. So yeah, I think he'd have a lot of suitors out there if that was the case.
Neal, Ndombele looks like he could be going to Paris Saint-Germain. I'm not sure how to look at him, and I don't really know how he's done in England, because he's been okay, but never really any more than that. Maybe a game or two where he'd go above that level, maybe a game or two where he'd be under that level, but he's never really sort of hit any heights where he's done much. And for PSG then to be thinking about coming in from, they must see something that Spurs aren't getting out of him.
Yeah, it's a bit of a puzzler that. Like, if you look at the players that can't get into Paris Saint-Germain's midfield, now I know Gini Wijnaldum can't get in, but very, very different type of player than Ndombele. I find it hard to rate Ndombele through England purely because he came in the Mourinho era. He wasn't signed by Mourinho, but he ended up in Mourinho's team, and he's such an anti-Mourinho player that he doesn't work hard enough, or doesn't appear to work hard enough. He's one of these guys that, remember, like they used to say it about Berbatov and stuff, that he has this kind of stance and kind of body language that you weren't really sure what you were getting out of him. And Ndombele is a guy with loads of flicks and tricks. He's brilliant on the ball. He's one of these kind of dying breed of midfielders that you don't get anymore. Instead, midfielders are a little bit more, less kind of flamboyant, but yes, there's more end product from them. So with Ndombele, I don't know where we really stand with him. There's definitely a player in there, but I think maybe they just need to find a position that he's best suited. I find it strange that Paris Saint-Germain would take a guy off Spurs, whose Spurs aren't really sure if he's a Spurs type of player. So unless it's a money scenario or a contract scenario where they want to get this guy off the books, because he was quite a hefty signing on the Spurs books. I think he might have been their highest, their record signing at one stage. So it just depends what they're going to do with him, where they see him playing. But for Spurs to let a guy like that go, you have to fill the void, because, Spurs are full of Højbjergs, that type of player. That contrast with Ndombele of a guy that's full of the tricks and skills is refreshing for me as a kind of a midfielder. You want to see a little bit more expression. I just don't really think he's found the right manager, and maybe Conte is in the same vein as Mourinho, where he doesn't want to see that style of play. He wants his midfielders to be competitive, and maybe turn over less ball. So if it's right for him, insofar as he gets a manager that trusts in his way of playing, and he can get more out of him, maybe that's the right move for him. But I'd be interested to see the money side of it. What kind of money would change hands in that regard?
Yeah, and Dave, I suppose when you look at Chelsea today, turning over Spurs 2-0, was there much in it? Is Ndombele someone who could change games?
Yeah, he's a bit of an enigma. Like, I think his time is done at Spurs regardless, no matter what. I can't. It's one of them where you just little bits that they were on, just for a split second. But I'm just going to rob the quote, because they were talking about Dele Alli. But like Keane said, sometimes it's just time to go to somewhere else and try something new. And I think it's very like that with Ndombele, and hopefully somebody else can unlock it. Now, the only stumbling block is that apparently Spurs will only accept if PSG cover 100% of his wages. So that's the only way the loan move's going to go. So obviously, being the fact that he was 60 odd million, their record signing, he probably come with a nice pay packet. So they very much want that off the book. So maybe they are sniffing around a couple of players, and he's a vital cog in getting rid of him. So if they're going to get it off anyone, there's a good chance of PSG. But I think for him, it is very similar to what the lad said about Dele Alli. It's just time to maybe try a fresh start somewhere else and give yourself a chance, because yeah, it's done at Spurs. Like he's been there too long, and yeah, it's time to move on.
Neal, when you look at today's game, Chelsea obviously won 2-0. They get the 3 points. Spurs had the games in hand. Everyone was talking about if Spurs do this and they do that, then all of a sudden they could be pushing for third, let alone fourth. Where does this show that Spurs are?
Do you know what it is, right? Even just, I only got highlights now today, but even just looking at the team sheet, Spurs have Matt Doherty and Sessegnon playing kind of left and right. Now, it's not even as wing backs, they're the 4-man defence. So that kind of tells you where they're lacking. You know, Conte set them up today to be very pragmatic. Højbjerg and Winks in the middle. You know, we're just talking about Ndombele. That's the type of guy that you want to be able to give the ball, to break the line, to get something further up the field. So for Spurs, I think they have a blueprint. I think under Conte, he's going to try and make them more difficult to beat and maybe score off the scraps rather than kind of outplay teams and outpass teams. By getting rid of Ndombele, it's shown his intention that he wants to cut down on the creative and be a little bit more cutthroat in the back line and make sure they don't concede. But they're just lacking that extra quality across the middle. And I think they have been for a number of years. Dele Alli, when he was in, I would say his prime, whenever that was, say 3 years ago now, when he was a player, you know, Spurs really had a very productive midfield under Pochettino. I remember watching him at Anfield live, and he kind of played a 4-man diamond midfield, and they bossed Liverpool for large parts of that game, which not many teams did at Anfield. But they've really regressed in their players and in their quality. Like, you had Christian Eriksen, you had Dele Alli, you had Harry Kane, and you had Son, you know, in their pomp at that stage. And they were a real threat, but they also kept possession. They played good football. Whereas now I still think they have a little bit of a hangover, Mourinho-esque from his end of his tenure. And now Conte is trying to address that. So maybe Conte is looking for a player that's going to change up that team, because they need a little bit more from the midfield rather than just have two kind of holding midfielders and relying on Moura and Kane and Son. So they need to change their tune more than likely. And the only way they're going to do that is to bring in some fresh blood.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, why always me? Mario Balotelli is getting not just the second chance, and we probably won't be able to count how many chances this fella has got, but Roberto Mancini for the playoffs has decided to bring him back into the squad. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. I tried to Google even just beforehand to see, has he scored an extra amount of goals this year? He's got 8 goals in 19 for Adana Demirspor. I'm going to take a punt that they're in the top league in Turkey, but I've never heard of Adana Demirspor. So he's obviously enjoying himself to an extent over there. But listen, he's obviously... It's just weird considering they're the European champions and how comfortable and how much we lauded them last year, that they're coming back to somebody like Mario Balotelli just like that. And obviously Insigne is only, 30, 31, and he's decided to jump over to Toronto. So you're kind of going, was it a one-hit wonder and a quite quick jump in the ship of a few players? I don't know. It's just a weird one. Like we all know who he is. You know, Neal's just had to put up the Mancini punching once. They definitely had a fight at Man City. There's no two ways about it. I don't know whether he landed on one on him, but they definitely did. But there's obviously a strange bond between the two of them. And, you know, maybe he, put up the bat signal and get what you need out of him, and then get somebody a bit more stable, because could you trust him to really lead the way in a World Cup campaign? I would say no, but... You know, when I read it today, I said, Jesus Christ, like the guy's like, you know, he's a cat. He obviously is a cat in a previous life, because fair play to him. But if I just quickly click on it down at Demirspor, lads, just for confirmation, yeah, they're in the top league. Fair play to them. You know, they're in the top league of Turkey.
Neal, is this really one of these things where you're tossing a coin? You know that Mario Balotelli has two sides to him. There's the fall apart, destructive side, and there's the goal winner, the match winner, who can score a goal from anywhere and can do, you know, impossible things. It must be a situation where Mancini is looking at a squad and going, I need a bit of that 50% that is special, and I don't have it in the squad that I have.
Yeah, the Mancini thing I find very interesting because we're saying there that they did have a huge bust up when they're at City. Like Mancini would have brought him in from Italy and identified him as maybe a bit of a loose cannon, but definitely a very talented individual. Now, in my opinion, for Mancini to go back in from either A, he's grown up a hell of a lot in the last few years, which I find hard to believe, or B, he's desperate. And if you look at the last few times someone has taken a punt on him, Liverpool, when they lost Suarez, were absolutely desperate and they knew that they were getting into a gambling situation for a stick or twist. And man, it did not work out. So I could see that going down the same road. I would not, no way in the depths of hell would I put my hat on Balotelli to come up trumps for you. I don't care what the circumstances are. He is damaged goods. You couldn't put him on the field. There was a great one with Mourinho years ago when his strikers were injured and at halftime Balotelli had a yellow card and he said to him in the dressing room, "Do not get booked again. You're the only one I have on the pitch. Do not get booked." And 3 minutes into the second half, he broke a guy up and got sent off. And if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Balotelli, whatever about the off the field, like he seemed to be a bit of a madioke on the roads. Even in Manchester, he had a reputation going around and handing money out the window. Like the guy doesn't play on the same planet that the rest of us do. But what a gamble. Like Italy must have an absolute a drought of strikers, of top strikers. If Balotelli is being mentioned, it could be that bad.
Yeah, I think it's along the desperation road that they're getting him back in, hoping that maybe not even starting him, maybe bringing him on and hoping he can change things for them because it's such a big game for them. Dave, big game. Well, there's a huge game on Friday night, which was Norwich against Watford. A real 6-pointer, this, and we slagged Norwich off. Well, mostly me. For
The whole
most of
world did.
season.
Don't worry about it.
And in all fairness, who was to know that there was a whole load of other teams who were going to be as muck as them? In all fairness, they've stuck with it, Norwich. Dean Smith has stuck with it, and these are the results that you have to get. Never mind the Liverpools, never mind the Man Uniteds and all those teams. These are the ones you have to get. And now this leaves Claudio and Ranieri in the position where there's talk that they might even replace him before the end of this transfer window. You could see that, Dave, couldn't you?
I was about to say Watford second a manager. Are you kidding me?
You could absolutely see that. But is that going to help any more than bringing Ranieri in the first place?
Absolutely not. And, yeah, but like it's one of them where obviously Ranieri hasn't done anything to really bolster them. There's no two ways about it. They've only 1 point in the last 5 matches. Like bringing somebody else in, another new method, and players will be like, Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? Like, now we have to listen to somebody else who's going to reinvent the wheel again and, blah, 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 blah. But obviously Ranieri hasn't got what he needs to out of them, and there's no two ways about it. But does that mean you pull the trigger straight away? I would say no. I think you just have to try and unlock what you can. And maybe the players aren't good enough, and he needs to just try and find that kind of right blend. Because the one common denominator all season is the players, but they seem to get away with it. Like many clubs, it's always the manager's fault, But it's the quickest and easiest thing to do because you can't just get rid of a whole squad. But Norwich, credit where credit's due with Dean Smith and obviously Josh Sargent with a lovely little flick goal into the top corner. Massive win, 2 from 2 now, outside the relegation. Only 3 points off Everton. Everton have games in hand, but that was a bad result for Everton yesterday to suck them into that now, and they're going to get very nervous, especially with Leeds picking up a few points. Obviously, City dropping points has made the title race a little bit interesting briefly, but this relegation battle could be an absolute belter coming into the business end of the season.
Yeah, Neil, I'm looking at the Premier League table just here now. Burnley get a draw against Arsenal today. That's one of their many games in hand. Watford lose, Newcastle win, and Norwich win. Everton lose yet again. It's going to be very, very tight, and it's going to be a team that can go and win 2 games out of every 5, possibly, that is going to stay up.
Yeah, just look at the table there. It's always interesting. I look at the out of the 30 games from the bottom, bottom five teams. There's 25 games, and there's 3 wins, and 2 of them belong to Norwich. Like that's actually
Yeah.
incredible turnaround. But it just shows if you can get a win, and then if you can follow it up with another positive result, be it win or a draw, it really does give you a big bolstering. So from an Irish perspective, I'm looking at Norwich, and Adam Ida played up front for them again. He's playing a 2-man. Dean Smith is 2-man up front. It doesn't always work out. They've kind of become unstuck as well. But he's played kids in there now that he's had his trust in. He seems to have kind of found his Pompey and Smith, and he seems to have them playing well. So you wouldn't have guessed this, 6-8 weeks ago. You just wouldn't have. They were dead and buried. And it shows the great job that Dean Smith has done in that regard. But for the rest of them, there's other teams being pulled in there now. Everton are being pulled in. Leeds are pulled in. Brentford maybe are looking over their shoulders, like they've played 23 games now and the wins have dried up. So there's a couple of teams that can still get pulled in, but at the end of the day, you got to get, what is it, one game out of 5 if you win at the moment, you're basically getting out relegation, which is absolutely madness when you think about it.
Yeah, madness is right. Not much going on down there, so the scraps are important. Newcastle again get the win under their belt, so it'll be interesting. And with only a week left in the transfer window, it's going to be very interesting to see what develops there, especially with Burnley losing a striker. That could be the decision on whether they go down or not, because they need a striker big time. Dave, Neal mentioned the title race before, and you mentioned it yourself. It makes it a lot more interesting now with City dropping points, Liverpool winning. I wouldn't say convincingly.
No.
Very, very shaky today, but Crystal Palace got an awful lot of opportunities. But if Liverpool win their game in hand, I think they go 6 points behind. And where we were thinking it was drifting away, it doesn't take much for it to change.
No, not really. And I still think it's a big ask. There's no two ways about it, because it's only one draw. They won 12 in a row, and there's no reason why City can't do it again. But I suppose with the cup win during the week, teams who are up at the top and competing, that's a bit of a momentum driver. City have won the League Cup a lot of times, and Chelsea under Mourinho's time, they always looked at it as a good kind of confidence booster getting into the business end of it. So maybe Liverpool could kind of go off the back of that in a bit of a buzz, because the first half an hour they looked very convincing, and I was like, oh, we're into the business end of the season here, and Liverpool are kicking into gear. And then all of a sudden they pressed the self-implode button, because geez, they were open all hours at the back, and were doing their best to try and throw it away at times. And then, of course, they got fortuitous penalty at the very, very end, which no doubt we can talk about and whatever. But look, it makes it interesting. It's still a big ask. But the fact that you are coming back into Europe and international games, it could be a bit tasty if City were to drop a few more points. But obviously, Liverpool need to maintain a massive run of form. They can't drop too many points at all, which is a huge task. But if they can even just go on a 3 or 4 game streak, just keep putting the squeeze on City. And if they play before City in a few of the fixtures, just might make it a little bit more tense, because that's what tends to happen. You win on a Saturday, you're playing on the Sunday, that game just gets a little bit tighter, and it might get tasty again. But there's a little glimmer of hope, because we all thought it was starting to drift away.
Yeah. Neal, Manchester United played West Ham on Saturday. There wasn't much between the two teams. There wasn't many opportunities. There wasn't a shot on target in the first half. Second half, a little bit more. Not that it was a poor game, but they were very even. There wasn't much between them. Antonio didn't set the world alight, and maybe that's exactly like Burnley is where they need it. They need some firepower up there, someone who's going to put a ball away, and maybe even someone who they can target, because Antonio really is just that link man.
Yeah, at the end of the day, look, there's nothing, fancy about Antonio. He's basically a wrecking ball, and then you set up your kind of second phase and third phase by hitting him and then getting runners in behind. I think Moyes has been clever enough. He's had Lanzini in there, Jared Bowen, he's guys running beyond them with better legs that are more clever technical players. So the way Moyes has them set up is very clever, but I imagine he's thinking to himself deep down, wouldn't it be great? We joke about with Antonio, but wouldn't it be great to have a 15/20 goal man in Antonio's place? Because like that, he's not really going to create something out of nothing. If I watched the Tottenham game last week, Harry Kane, Jesus, he was popping up everywhere. It's like he was kind of back to his best, where he was creating chances where they didn't seem to be there. So it's definitely an area they need to improve on. whether they have the money or the kind of investment that they want or that kind of target, because these guys don't, they don't grow on trees. So I think from West Ham's perspective, if they want to kick on, they need not just a striker, but a striker that's going to get you them goals in tight games. I think West Ham are very, very reliant on set pieces. And again, it nearly bore fruit against Man United. And I thought that was the only way they were really going to break them down. It was just interesting after the game to hear the team say, you need to learn to hold on to games like that. From West Ham's point of view, as if they were winning to see out a game, but they weren't winning. They were quite happy with the draw, which is why it made it probably twice as bitter that they threw it away in the last minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although, just a quick one, Roy, being a United man, I was quite impressed with United in the first half with the pressing, and it looks like they're slowly but surely trying to get there, because there was a hint of it with Villa as well, probably for the first hour before the legs maybe went. But I'm not saying it's the start of something, but I believe that they were trying their best to get at it. Now, not everyone was doing it, because I have a question mark on one specific player, and I'm going to have to say it, and it's Mason Greenwood. Lads, watch him off the ball. I think he does nothing. I've watched him 4 games in a row now, and I really think he offers zero when they're off the ball, and it's getting worrying, because I like him and I think he's a smashing player. But it could be very interesting over the next few weeks, because if that is true, Ranić will spot that quite quick, and it'll be very interesting.
Yeah, well, he has other players there who can play in that position, so it's not too much. I've seen him chasing back. I've seen him back in right full. Maybe it's on the second wave.
I think he gets into the positions, but then that's it. He doesn't actually get at the player. I think he's very good at getting into the positions and fooling you, but actually getting in and trying to get that ball and win it. I think he's very good at getting into the areas, but then it's like, I've made it back, and then that's it. It's actually get in and enforce yourself and chase the way some of the others, because I've seen Fred overtaking him a couple of times, and that's not a good thing when you see centre midfielders coming out and outrunning you to get at a player. So I'm not denying, I'm sure the Opta stats will say he's ran his 10K or whatever, but I think he's good at getting into the areas, but then actually trying to get in and actually get the ball or prevent them from making mistakes. I just don't think he does it. I think he's good at getting where he needs to be, but not really getting stuck in. But then again, there's a lot of players like that,
Yeah, man, he'll be definitely found out, because Ranić, if there's anything that he's done, he's made sure that people are going to be working hard, because you look at Shaw, you look at Wan-Bissaka, you're gone. Would Maguire have been in if Lindelof had been available for that game the other day? No, I don't think he would have been. Yeah. I think Fernandes is working his arse off. I've watched him. I actually think Fernandes would play better in beside McTominay, because anytime he gets on the ball, he's able to spray that ball around, and he works hard.
Like that ball into the Ronaldo where he just missed it in the header in the first half. No one else has that in the locker at United, and you need him maybe that bit deeper.
Yeah, I think he'd be a deeper player. He'd do better than Matic, and he'd be more creative. He'd get on the ball. He'd go forward with the ball quicker. So I think he'd do well there. I think Manchester United were okay. I don't think they were amazing. It's amazing what Cavani does when he comes on the pitch. He just gives that little boost of energy. Even when they scored the goal, it was like he won the World Cup. It's just, he's such a positive vibe, so they do have some positives, but they're still miles off. And it's because he dropped that 4-2-2-2. That was going nowhere. And he decided to go back and work on what he said the players are able to work on. That's fair enough. He's playing that 4-2-3-1, so they're comfortable with that. So, yeah, he might get some success out of it, and hopefully he does. They won't blow teams away, though. That's for definite. So, my question to you, Dave, was going to be, is David Moyes the man who can actually bring West Ham onto the next level?
I think Neal hit the nail on the head, to be honest, in the sense that if you got that type of player, say, for example, it was somebody of Harry Kane's ilk, I don't think there'd be a bit debate for who the top 4 is this year, really, because if you had that extra 10 or 15 goals in the locker, because West Ham, they've scored 41 actually this year, which is quite impressive, but they're still leaking a few. But listen, that's where I think it is. It's very hard to get to that next level, because let's face it, the next level is Liverpool, Chelsea, and then the next level after that is Man City, it's very difficult. But there's a lot there. They have a 50,000 seater stadium. They have a billionaire owner in the background with Sullivan and Gold, who, in credit where credit's due, have done a decent job, and they're backing the manager, and he seems to have, everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. So far so good, but it's just, after a year or two at this level, eventually fans and people like us will be like, right, that's great. And what are you going to do? Are you going to accept that this is your level, or are you going to try and get to the next level? And this is where the billionaire owner might need to start splashing the cash a bit. But if you can get somebody, I'm not saying it has to be Harry Kane, but of that ilk, genuinely, I don't think there's a debate that that's the top four and it's sewn up if they had somebody like that at the start of the year. Now, obviously, there's other bits and pieces, let's be honest. But, it's, you can enjoy this for a year or two, but then it's a case of, right, you know what you need to do now. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you need to try and give it a go if you want to try and eke out the Champions League spots consistently, because you can get that even for 2 or 3 years. That could really set them up because of the extra money. And all of a sudden, Spurs and Arsenal, United are going, shite, we're in trouble here because we don't just have Liverpool, Chelsea and City. Now it's West Ham that are going to be competing with us financially. So that's where it'll be interesting to see with the new owner exactly their potential for spending power.
And is it important that West Ham get the top 4 spot? Because Declan Rice yesterday flirting with old Trafford. He's 23 years of age. He, in fairness to him, he played well again yesterday. He does put pressure on the ball. He does win the ball. I think I could see him improving all the time. Is he someone that is going to start looking, because he's played for England, he's been in a Euro final, someone who's going to start looking at Champions League and, hold on, I'm 23 now. I really want to start getting my chance to win stuff that X, Y, and Z from the England team has won.
Have you met Declan Rice? Of course. He will gladly stick the knife into West Ham. No bother. I think last time I checked, he was kissing the Ireland badge, and next minute he's 3 lines on his short. Listen, of course he'll jump ship if needs be. But I wouldn't have looked too into depth about the comments yesterday, but everyone would love that because obviously there was rumours about United. But look, if West Ham were to make it this year, it'll make it a lot easier to keep their better players and maybe try and build around them. But mark my words, if West Ham show any signs of decline, he'd be gone like a shot to his pal at Chelsea or up to United or whoever looks like they're going to get him into that Champions League. And I understand to an extent, because if West Ham aren't going to do it, he's going to want to go elsewhere, because he is getting to that level where he believes, well, he'll obviously believe that that's who the type of player he is anyway. So if he can't get it at West Ham, he's going to get it elsewhere. That's for sure, Yeah.
Neal, again, looking at the league table, Leicester City today, 1-0 up, Daka scores, draw 1-1 against Brighton. They're dropping an awful lot of points lately. They're not pushing upwards anyhow. Let's put it this way. They're getting points to keep them from that little drop down just above the relegation zone. It's fairly possible, looking at Leeds on 22 points and Leicester City on 26 points, that they could drift down to that pack just above the relegation zone.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see. I still think they've enough quality, and I think they've enough they've shown enough in the last 3 seasons where I think definitely the bubble has burst this season as far as they were, kind of competing for the top 4, and now all of a sudden they've kind of fallen out of that ilk. And like Dave was saying there about West Ham, for West Ham to get into the top 4 is exactly what Leicester need to do to get into the top 4. They need to invest, and they need to invest huge money, because you're not going to pass, the likes of Man United and Chelsea and Liverpool. You are not going to get in amongst them and then hope to compete with them unless you're spending that type of money on quality players. Leicester have paid the price for letting go 1 or 2 of their better players over the last few seasons. They've brought in the kind of wish.com version of them for the cheap, and it hasn't worked out, and they've only themselves to blame in that regard. The model seemed to be working for a period of time. They were unearthing these guys. You were going, well, where did he come from? 25 million. And it's just kind of beginning to run slow now. So I think they just have to take their comeuppance this season. The most they can hope for is top 6. I don't even think they'll get that. They need to rebuild, they need to replenish, and they need to really think about where they want to be in the next 2 to 3 years, because Spurs are there, West Ham are there, Arsenal are there, and they're all chomping at the bit to get into that position. So for Leicester, they've lost ground. And you know yourself, you can't stand still in the Premier League these days. You get overran. So I wouldn't be too worried if I'm a Leicester supporter. I still think they've got it in the tank to get up the places. But I think it's almost like a hangover from the way they lost out on Champions League in the last 2 years. And now they find themselves in a position kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I think they'll just see out the rest of the season comfortable enough. I don't think they'll get drawn into relegation, but they definitely need to have a think about their strategy for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I don't think they get into relegation problems, but I can see them the way that the results have been going for them for a couple of months now, just drifting into that lower half and not having an inspiring season at all. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much, Neil and Dave. We will talk to you again next week. And of course, transfer window will be upon us. So it'll be interesting to see what way the rest of the season is going to shape up with players coming in and leaving in the Premier League. See you next week.